A Russian interceptor has been scrambled to stop a rogue U.S. fighter jet from actively interfering with an anti-terrorist operation, the Russian Defense Ministry said. It also accused the U.S. of provoking close encounters with the Russian jets in Syria. A U.S. F-22 fighter was preventing two Russian Su-35 strike aircraft from bombing an Islamic State, former ISIS, base to the west of the Euphrates November 23, according to the ministry. The ministry's spokesman, Major General Igor Konashenkov, described the episode as yet another example of U.S. aircraft's attempts to prevent Russian forces from carrying out strikes against Islamic State. The F-22 launched decoy flares and used airbrakes while constantly maneuvering near the Russian strike jets, imitating an air fight, Konashenkov said. He added that the U.S. jet ceased its dangerous maneuvers only after a Russian Su-35S fighter jet joined the two strike planes. The Major General went on to say that most close-midair encounters between Russian and U.S. jets in the area around the Euphrates River have been linked to the attempts of U.S. aircraft to get in the way of the Russian warplanes striking against Islamic State terrorists. He also said that the U.S. military officials provided no explanation for the November 23 incident as well as other, similar encounters. The statement came as a response to the Pentagon's claims about an increase in unsafe behavior by Russian warplanes. We saw anywhere from 6 to 8 incidents daily in late November, where Russian or Syrian aircraft crossed into our airspace on the east side of the Euphrates River, Lieutenant Col. Damien Pickard, the spokesman for U.S. Air Force Central Command, told CNN earlier on Saturday. Konashenkov said that any claims made by U.S. military officials concerning the fact that there is any part of the airspace in Syria that belongs to the U.S. are puzzling. Konashenkov also said that Syria is a sovereign state and a UN member, and that means that there can be no U.S. airspace of its own. Unlike the Russian Air Force, the US-led coalition is operating in Syria without any legal basis, he added. Konashenkov said in response that the US Air Force should rather focus on destroying Islamic State in Iraq than provoking close encounters between the US and the Russian jets. Pickard said to CNN that the U.S. military regularly talked to their Russian counterparts in the daily deconfliction calls. However, the Russian military repeatedly pointed out that the U.S. is reluctant to share its plans for combat aircraft operations and acts secretively in Syria. The U.S. and the Russian military have traded jibes over various incidents involving both countries' warplanes in the Syrian skies. Washington accused Russian jets of not carrying transponders allowing air traffic controllers to identify them, while Moscow repeatedly said that the U.S. military only occasionally indicate the time period and an approximate area of their air operations without even giving the types of aircraft and their affiliation. Back in 2015, the U.S. and Russia agreed upon the Mutual Flight Safety Memorandum regulating the flight paths and contacts of the country's air forces in Syria during an emergency situation. The two countries also set up a hotline for their militaries to discuss the approximate locations and missions of planes in an attempt to avoid operating in the same airspace at the same time. However, both sides later repeatedly accused each other of being reluctant to use the instruments at their disposal to reconcile the issues related to their actions in Syria. Most recently, Colonel Jeff Hogan, deputy commander of the Air Operations Center at the Qatar base, called the daily phone calls between the U.S. and Russian military contentious. The U.S. also said that the dialogue does not always reflect what happens in the skies over Syria. In January, Konashenkov complained that the U.S. officers often simply cannot be found on the other side of the hotline in Qatar, designed to discuss and resolve contentious issues, and urged them to use this hotline more often and for its correct purposes. Right double quotation mark.
The Su-34, with its unique and eye-catching design, it's a relatively new aircraft, and this is actually its first combat deployment here in Syria. The plane is packed with electronics and specializes in it's geared for modern-day precision warfare. These bombs, for example, are guided bombs. Their flight is corrected in real time by the gunner, by the co-pilot. And on that note, a lot has been done for pilot comfort. There's apparently even a small toilet for them.
Most stops don't go on long enough to need a bathroom break. You have, for example, simple strikes on terror hideouts in the countryside. Plain old unguided bombs, we're told, do the job. But sometimes you need pinpoint accuracy.
And this is the weapon of choice for when you absolutely must hit bullseye. It's a laser-guided missile, part of Russia's precision weapons arsenal being used here in Syria. The plane or troops on the ground point the military equivalent of a laser pointer at a target, light it up, as they say. And this warhead hones in on that. When it explodes, the lethality is twofold. First, there's the blast wave, the explosion, and then there's shrapnel.
Russia has made clear it will go out of its way to prevent civilian casualties. This, Moscow promises, will be a quick, clean and clinical strike on terror. Morad Gazdiev, RT from Syria.